Hello friends of .NET, I'm Emil Landworth and you can find me on Twitter at TerraJobs. Jesus, how is it going? So today we are going to do a little bit of a development on our REPL because I want the REPL to be a little bit more powerful so we can actually introspect our program a little bit more, because in the upcoming weeks we will going to emit IL, and so one of the things we will have to do is a little bit of debugging of what our bound tree actually looks like. And that's much easier when you can actually look at the representation for each individual function. I will also take some pull requests today, and hopefully we will also do some fun stuff, because not everything needs to be hard, and today is hopefully a somewhat easy day, so we set the foundation for what we can do moving forward. I'll also try to do a better job with the chat, because it seems every single time I'm doing my live stream I get lost in the details and don't actually pay attention to the chat. I actually watched a few other Twitchers, like Frank Kruger, for example, who does an amazing job trying to keep up with the chat. I don't know how he does it. My mind is going places as soon as I see the code editor, so I apologize for that. Alrighty, then I think it's time for us to just jump right into the thing. Alright, so let's take a look at our pull request again. Stuff has been happening since last week. Lucas was busy. Let's take a look. If only I could figure out how to switch tabs. Here we go. All right, so let's take a look at the changes. I think I reviewed them already last time. Yeah, so we targeted everything to .NET Core App 3.1 except for the tests. As always, the tests, nobody pays attention to them. Yep, for some reason, passclick cases identifier, probably because of autocomplete and VS Code. That looks good. Yeah, so that's one of those things where our text writer extensions were defined over text writer, and then effectively we checked whether the text writer is console out to determine whether we turn on colors or not. That doesn't work so well when we write to console.error, and so I think what this does is basically checks whether it's out or error, and it also checks whether the output is redirected, which makes sense. And then the other thing it handles is whether the inner writer is console out. Okay, that makes sense, and it changes all of that. Write diagnostics, writer.writeLine, yep, that is, yep, should have fixed that as well, we didn't. Okay, so MC is our compiler, and so what he's doing here is instead of having void, he returns an int, which makes sense because if compilation fails, you generally want to return an error code, which is especially useful when you use some sort of build orchestration tool like make or MS build, because you generally want errors to be raised to the user, and when the compilation fails, you generally consider the build failed. That makes sense. And then we write everything to error, to console error rather than somewhere else. Yep, that all makes sense. That's all great stuff. Good morning, Brian. Brian says merge it. Well, before you merge anything, you review the change. You just don't blindly press the merge button. That's not how this works. All right, so what's happening here? Okay, that's the same change. I'm curious what happens when I try to merge this one. Let's go here. Okay, now I need to untap this thing because I don't know how to navigate tabs otherwise. So we just closed this one, which was 81. All right. Unfortunately, it's also a word that I can never type, so I just try to get it into the vicinity and then I right click and just say fix it. Works pretty well. It was faster and I just merged it with 81. All right, so this one is done, and then I think, what do we have left? Only the hard ones, which we said we will do at a later stage. So that's great. So now let me actually toggle over to our command line again and get me going on master again. You didn't see this. This comes later. Let's pull what we just merged. Let's run the test just to be on the safe side. Brian says, what's the fun in that? Well, if you don't review the changes and you merge them, then yeah, you are probably in for a surprise. All right, so everything's great here. So now let's just clean this guy here. And let me just do a quick thing here where I just open up my notes for today. And let me just move them over the other window. Boom, boom, boom. Awesomeness. So before we go into too much detail, I would like to talk about one quick thing here. So some of you noticed that I have syntax highlighting for my language. That one was actually done very cheaply, not by me. I just use, when you look at the bottom right corner here, I'd say this is CoffeeScript. Because CoffeeScript is close enough syntax-wise. I mean, it's some sort of JavaScript-y thingy, right? I tried JavaScript before, but when I do JavaScript, VS Code tries really hard to type check your JavaScript program, and given that it's not JavaScript, that results in a bunch of squiggles all over the place, so I didn't do that. And CoffeeScript apparently is just doing syntax highlighting, which is kind of what I want. So if you want this as well, what you can do, and I remember correctly how I did this, I think it's under editor, text editor. I think you can do, what is it, files? So there is a way to open up your preferences, which for some reason last time I also couldn't find it anymore. Maybe they removed the menu item and just go always to this nice view, but unfortunately that, maybe here we go, file extensions, here we go. So all you have to do here is basically say star.ms, do CoffeeScript for that. And then every time you open up an MS file, it basically has syntax highlighting, which is quite neat. I mean, it's not what we want in the long run, but you know, for the time being, using somebody else's syntax highlighter, good enough. At least you get some basics going. Better than looking at raw text output. Another thing that I stumbled upon last time, which was actually surprisingly interesting. So I think this is parse tokens. Yeah, this one here. So here's an interesting conundrum. So can we close this here? We can, great. So here's an out variable, out diagnostics, and I forgot to assign it. And so if we now go on the command line and we try to build this, you will notice that the build just succeeds. No warning, no errors. And that's kind of odd because the way C# normally works is out, or any variable normally, C# forces you to assign it, even though it usually sets the flags in the CLR that says initialize to 0, so you don't get undefined behavior like in C++, where whatever random shit is on the stack is now in the variable. But generally speaking, when you don't assign variables, you probably have a bug in your program, and so that's why C# normally tells you that don't do that. So I was very surprised to find out that I didn't assign the out variable, and I was wondering, why did this not stop compiling? And people said that, oh, because immutable array is a value type. That's not the reason. Like if you do this here, string test out int var, and I leave it like that, I mean, modulo all the typos here, but who cares really? You see there's a red squiggle now, and it says the out parameter var must be assigned to before control for leaves the current method. So, and int is clearly a value type, right? And it doesn't matter whether I set it to string, whether I set it to some random class, list of int, let's say, right? The error keeps appearing, right? And if I use immutable array, then for some reason it disappears. And that's an actual interesting scenario. So originally what I thought was happening is that when you look at immutable array in the reference assembly, I thought the reference assembly, because all the fields are private, it didn't look like immutable array has any fields. And the way C# works with definite assignment rules is if a struct does not have any fields, well, then there's nothing to assign, right? And so that's why we changed our reference assemblies to actually include private fields as well, so the compiler knows that there is something to assign. So I checked that. Turns out immutable array has actually fields in the reference assembly. So at that point I was like, what the heck is going on? And turns out this is an actual compiler bug, or feature, depending on what you want to call this. There's actually a ROSN issue for that. Let me just open it to you in all glorious details. Turns out they had the same problem. They noticed that the immutable array local symbol was never assigned to, which is very similar to what I had. And then turns out this was a leftover from the native compiler, but the native compiler had a bug, and so it wasn't just preserve that behavior to avoid raising new warnings. But there's a way you can override this with this thing called strict. And when we discussed this on Twitter, people had a lot of, let's just say, funny reactions to that. Strict, stricter, strictest, right? That kind of leads itself to that kind of thing. So everything that is in features is generally unsupported. This is basically just a way for the compiler to pass arbitrary key value, not even key value pairs, just keys to the compiler. And then it turns on behavior. So that's what the compiler team is doing for experimental stuff. So this is not supported. However, it fixes most of these issues where the compiler didn't raise diagnostics because of backwards compatibility. So in the long run, the compiler team plans on solving this with ROSN analyzers, where they effectively give diagnostics that you can suppress with editor config and other mechanisms. And that avoids the whole, oh my God, my code stopped compiling because of, whatever reason, right? You basically have a way to control this with that. So this is generally not recommended. However, I don't want to wait until this happens because I'm an idiot usually, and I will make mistakes like that. And so one of the things we want to do here is just leave it as is and just make our lives a little bit easier. Okay, now I have it pending change somewhere apparently. What did I do? Oh yeah, I should probably not do that. And now we want to, actually, let's do that. Let's make sure that we actually get a warning, parse tokens. So let me comment this out. And then what I will do is I already have this global file here somewhere, directory.build.props, which basically also sets the language version for all my projects. And I will set that to two things. I will first set it to 8.0, because I want to use C#8. And I will also set this to strict. And so now if we build it, now we should get a warning that says you didn't assign this guy. Even better, we get an error. So awesome sauce. And now when I do this, all my stuff compiles. Did I just close my notes? I did just close my notes. Actually, I didn't close my notes. I'm just on the wrong screen for my notes. This is one of those problems with multiple monitors, is that, yeah, where the heck are my notes now? Are they here? Oh, are they here? Here they are. All right, let me pin this window to the, to all my screens so I don't have that problem. All right, so awesome sauce. All right, so now we have this. Let me check out a new branch for episode 16. Let me stage this guy. Set language version and enforce strict rules. And then for good measure, we do the same thing we always do. We create our pull request right from the get-go. So if you would like to download my my stuff, you can. Alrighty, so, and again, I keep repeating myself, but strict is not supported. So if you want to use it now, you can, but you know, don't file bugs against the compiler team that it doesn't do what you want, because they don't want to support this. Alright, so now let's look at our REPL. So one thing we do right now in our REPL, if we launch our REPL, is we have these commands like clear screen, you know, show tree, but we don't have help. So if I want to know what commands are available, I'm out of luck right now. We don't have a way to pass arguments, so sometimes it would be nice to say dump, you know, get name, right? Assuming we have a function called get name, it would effectively show me what the immediate representation for get name would look like. So these are the kind of things I want to work on today. But before we do that, I want to fix one thing that kind of annoys me. It's more aesthetics than anything. And that's why, you know, my compiler is called MC and my interactive is called MI. Unfortunately, MI is already taken by PowerShell as move item, so that's kind of sad. It also generally doesn't follow the conventions from the other compilers. They all have an S inside of it, which stands for sharp, right? C sharp, F sharp. So you have FSI and FSC and CSC, right? So I will just insert an S everywhere. That solves almost all the problems. But unfortunately, because you also have these shell scripts, I have to remember again what I did to set the freaking execute bit again, so I don't lose that when I rename those. So that's one thing I want to do first. So let's do git move mi, or let's start with MC to MSC to MC. Let's do that one. And then we say git move mi to mi, MSI. MSI is also not great, right? So what else would we want to do? Oh yeah, we want to say git mv MC to MSC, and we want to say git move mi to SI. But this MSI is normally an extension, not a tool, so that's fine. And now I have to do this thing called git. Yeah, there's no hope for me, so let's just Google this. Git change schmod. Yeah, that's the one. That looks familiar. So this would be for MC, MSCH and MSIH. Except that we don't want to remove the execute bit, we want to set it. That was that one. And that was that one. So now let's see what we have done so far. Actually, that's not, oh, actually, that's not everything, right? You know, we just have these guys renamed, but we also want to change the project names. So, all right, so let's call this MSC, 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 MSC. Yeah, MSI is probably going to make people sad. But hey. All right, so we have that. Now the fun part. Let's change the project files. MSC. uh, yeah, somebody called me out on it. All the other compilers have an S. Well, the cool ones do. I mean, I know VB doesn't have that. VB is VBC, but like honestly, I still think that's a lost opportunity. Imagine Visual Basic would have been called B sharp. Come on, B sharp. How awesome would that name have been? I mean, I understand why they didn't do that, but like, there's some part of me that finds that sad. Anyway, so there's that. So we named the project files. Now, of course, that is only half of it. The other half is our favorite file format, the solution file. See, this file is so rarely edited in a text editor that VS Code doesn't even bother with the syntax highlighting. So what is the thing here? So it's called MSI here, MSI, MSI, and then MSC, MSC, MSC. And the rest is just GUIDs. So what are the chances that this works? All right, git clean XDF. Wow, 444. I should not change my build times now. All right, so if I now run MSI, this will crack me up every single time I launch it probably. But okay, cool. So now let's do this. Rename compiler projects to avoid name collisions. Isn't B already a language? Sure, but when was the last time you saw somebody typing code in B? I mean, yeah, exactly. It was pre-C, so here we go, right? I think B was the reason that C has this weird thing where if you dereference a struct that is a pointer, you have to use the arrow. And if you dereference, basically if you access a struct, if the struct is a pointer, you have to say, you know, my struct arrow my field. And if the struct is not a pointer, then you just say struct dot something. I think that was one of the things that was a carryover from B. I think it had to do with name resolutions and stuff. Weird stuff. All right, so then I think we are almost there where I wanted to be for preparing this. All right, so now let's go to our REPL. So if we look at our REPL right now, so we have this thing called meta command. And the way it works right now is if I basically see, yeah, let's actually say where does this guy get called. So basically the line starts with a pound. I just basically pass it to this evaluate meta command function. And we have this basic REPL, which basically has the busy portion of the REPL, the interaction with the screen, but none of this is language specific. And all the stuff that is actually the specific to our language is encapsulated here. And that's not because I want to support multiple languages, that's just to keep a separation of concerns, right? The bullshit thing with the screen and then the actual language specific portions here. It's just nicer because I mostly edit this and I rarely have to touch this. And this file is, as you can tell, I don't know, it's not super large, but it's large enough to be annoying at times. So, okay, how do we do this? So one thing I want to do is, instead of doing this, where I just basically, if you go here in the REPL, we just have this, you know, switch statement. That is very hard for us to write a general help command now because we have to duplicate all of this stuff. So the first thing I want to do is, instead of me hand coding this, let's just come up with some attribute that we can put on a meta command that would allow us to indicate a method that is a meta command, and then we just find all the methods that are meta commands, and then, you know, we know how to call them effectively. So let's invent this attribute. And I guess the easiest way to do this here is to say we have a protected, sealed class, meta command attribute, which derives from attribute. Maybe say, what is it called? Attribute usage, attribute targets method. Allow multiple false inherited true. I think it's already the default, so we can ignore that. And then we say, what do we have? We have a constructor. Oh, this code is really smart. That's not the constructor I want though. String name. Sweet. All right, and now what we can do is we can say we have a, in our case, yeah, I guess private works. Private void evaluate help. And then all we have to do here is we can just say meta command, and we say help. And then we just say console.writeLine help. Okay, then another thing we probably want is we want some sort of private class meta command, which basically just holds our data for the meta command, which in our case would just be, yeah, it's not annoying at all. Meta command string name, and I think we want a method info. That actually is the method we want to call, or something like that. Good point. Somebody says, now your rename has also validated all existing PRs. Ouch. Yeah, I did not consider that. Yeah, I guess, I mean, the nice thing with Git is, like, if push comes to shove, it's not that hard to fix, because all I do is basically I take this current commit that I did, and we just cherry pick this one commit into each branch. Sorry, into each PR, into each PR's branch. And then because the way Git usually works is if the changes are identical, you don't get merge conflicts. And so this way, each branch basically now is on the same naming again, and then things are not that bad. Yeah, Git is sometimes hard to use, but at least it's very powerful, right? So you can always unscrew the situation that you find yourself in. All right, so we have this one now. Now we need, of course, need to somehow get our meta commands. Not that hard. Private sealed, yeah. Private read-only list of meta commands. Meta commands is new list of meta command. And while we're here, let's make this guy read-only here. And while we're good citizens, let's just commit these guys as individual change, because why not? Mark field as read-only. It's a bit cleaner and doesn't cost us anything. Yeah, I guess in the beginning we want to do something like initialize meta commands, which so protected REPL, because it's an abstract type, right? There's no point in having a public constructor. And then we have a private void initialize meta commands. And we just call this if only I could type. So what do? We say, okay, give me the methods. So what we would say is for each var method in get type, get methods, and now we have to pass in binding flags to make sure that we get the methods we want. Really? I don't get help yet. Binding flags, private. Okay, what's happening here? Why do I not get? I guess it's time again to relaunch VS Code. I mean, I love VS Code. I mean, generally speaking, I'm actually surprised how much I like it. But this is actually really annoying. If you sometimes do things for some reason, the language service gets out of sync, and then you find yourself in a crazy world. Of course, I'm in the wrong one now. What? Oh, never mind. Apparently my intention was downloading. Okay, that explains that. If you don't have a language integration, then yeah, that might be a problem. Let's give it a moment. Type reload in the command bar, that just reloads the editor. That's cool, I didn't know that. Are you ready now, or are we still waiting for something? So what is happening? Oh, now we finally get IntelliSense. All right, here we go. Using reflection, yay. All right, so we want private. I guess it's called non-public, right? We want binding flags static, and we want binding flags instance. And we want, yeah, I guess that works. So basically this is everything, right? It's ourselves and let's just call this methods. Let's make this a bit more readable. All right, so now we say for each method, get custom attributes. In our case, let's say get custom attribute data. Can I actually filter this? Single or default. CD attribute type equals type of metadata metadata command, meta command attribute. Yeah, that's the one. Attribute. So if the attribute is not there, if attribute is null, we say continue. Otherwise, we say var name is attribute constructor arguments. Single or default. What? Oh, because this is a struct. All right, fine, be like that. And if string is null or empty, is that right? I guess so, right? Then we say continue. Otherwise, we say var meta command this new meta command for name and method, and then we say meta commands add meta command. Right? Right. And then one thing we can do here, because why not? We can add another thing here, which would be, let's say, description, public string description, get set. And then we can say description I guess it helps to set it here as well. Shows help. This would give us parity. And now, okay, we have this guy, and then we can say var description would be attribute. I think it's called named arguments, single or default, named arguments, and a member name is name of meta command attribute name. Oh, not that one, that one. Right? And we can say typed value. Boom, 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 boom. So if we have one, we say typed value. I guess we already had that typed value as string, right? And then we can just say meta command. I guess in this case, we would just pass it as a thing to the constructor, because that is just nicer. And then we just say initialize this guy, and then we just make this read only. All right. Yeah, so somebody's asking, why don't you use get custom attribute data? That's fair. I mean, I don't know, like usually when you do metadata stuff, you should not use custom attributes because you just instantiate them for zero reason really. Because really what you care about is more about what's actually passed to this. You don't really care about the instance of the attribute. I mean, yes, it would be easier to work with that for sure. You know what? Let's do that. Let's just see what this looks like. Why not? Attribute would be method get custom attributes. Get custom attribute. I guess I'm still net standard 2, right? Yes. Okay, so then we don't have the generic one. Type of what is it? Metadata command attribute. And now I can just say name description. Well, yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. All right, so we have this. Now basically all I have to do is I say for each var meta command in meta commands console dot write line. That would be meta command name. I can never remember what the alignment is, so let's say meta command description. I think it was something like this is not going to work. So string format alignment. Aligning strings with string format. What is C? I guess it's padding what I want, right? Yeah, something like this. It's probably going to be, I guess, yeah, so ideally we want to align it what the maximum length is, right? So we could say max length, max name length would be meta commands max for MC name length, right? And then unfortunately the way this works is we will padded name is meta command. I guess we can, it's probably easier for us to do this like this. Pad right, total width is max name length. And then we just say we use padded name, something like that. All right. What are the chances that any of this works? Yeah, I think Frank, you're right. I think that would have worked. The problem is that you can't pass 12 as a variable to the format string. You have to pass it as it has to be literal basically, and that kind of defeats the point. Oh yeah, we haven't done any coding yet to actually evaluate our command. So that's the thing we need to change here too. Evaluate meta command. So basically what we have to do now here is we have to say command name. I think I pass it with the pound sign, so that would be input substring 1. And then we would say var command is meta commands single or default, where MC name equals command name. If command is null, then we give this output here, which is to say it doesn't work. We make it non-virtual and we make it private. Otherwise, we just say command method invoke for our own instance and with no arguments. Nope, this will not compile because we of course has to fix this here. Meta command. Yeah, so let's just split this guy into multiple methods now. We need 4 methods, right? So let's start with this one here. Show tree. And we call this meta command show tree. Shows the parse tree. Yeah, what's actually nice now, I can actually make my life simpler and say, you know what, actually I want this to be an argument to the constructor, string description. It would have been a little bit pain in the ass in the other model because now we would have to extract the value differently, but now we can just forward that. We would call this evaluate show tree. Booyah. And then of course it's not an override, it's just this one. And it shouldn't be protected because we are in a sealed class. Alright, so now what's the other one called? Show program. Shows the bound tree. Boom, boom, boom. All right, so now we have CLS and reset. All right. Evaluate CLS. CLS clears the screen. And then we have reset. Clears all previous submissions. All right, and we call this evaluate reset. And now we don't need this method at all. Interesting. I guess. Don't need a space between the name and the description? Probably. Invalid command help. Ouch. So first of all, classical error. And for now, let's reverse this guy, because I like the shorter one first. So the question really is, and I think it has to do with inheritance, why don't we get our help? Oh, because, well, that should have worked, right? Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, I think what we have to do here in our initialize, I think we have to say flatten hierarchy. Binding flags, flatten hierarchy. So that we actually get both the members of the base type as well as the members of the derived type. Let's see whether this fixes that. Okay, now I'm at loss. What is happening here? We call it help, right? We did call it help. And we do say text contains, starts with this one, evaded meta command. We go here. We substring it by one, command name. We say the name must be the command name. The command name is not null. Then we invoke it, which makes sense because we say invalid command input. Yep, that works. Yeah, we could use the dictionary, that is also true. But that's not my problem right now. I mean, first of all, let's actually fix this. Let's actually do two spaces here. But that's also not fixing the problem. So this guy assigns the name, right? So we get it out again. And we do call our initialize method too, right? Well, if everything fails, you can always debug. So launch debugger, we launch our Netcore app 3.1, MSI. All right, let's do this. Let's set a breakpoint and see what ends up happening. Okay, helps to quit. What is happening? Okay, so then let's do this one more time. So our breakpoint is actually hit. Ta-da-ta-da. So all right, let's set a breakpoint here and see whether this ever hits. It hits. Okay, so what do we have? We have CLS, we have description. Okay, so then let's go here and see what are the meta commands we have. We have show program, we have show tree, we have reset, and we have CLS. Okay, so maybe I was wrong. I'm very confused by that. So why don't we see this one? Okay, what else do we have? We have so we have instance, yes. We have static, we have that only members declared at the level of the subappliance type hierarchy should be considered. Inherited members are not considered. Flatten hierarchy. Specify that public protected static members up the hierarchy should be returned. Private static members in the inherited classes are not returned. Okay, it's not static, so static members include fields, methods, events, properties, nested types are not returned. Okay, so maybe even if I do this, no, what was the other one? Non-public, yeah. Let's do public, non-public, not comma though. And then let's just make this guy protected. Maybe there is an issue where we just don't flatten privates. Flattening privates sounds pretty bad, come to think of it. Sounds like a thing from, what is the show name? Oh, This Is the Good Place. All right, so let's issue help again. Just works. That was easy. All right, so then while we're at it, let's order it by name. All right. Which is already is for some reason, but fine. All right, so we have that, which is nice. Yeah, so one thing we want to do probably is actually supply arguments. So that gets a little bit more tricky. Let me just look at the time here. How much time do we have? Oh, we have still time to go, which is good. So we want to do a thing where we can say, like where's our evaluate command? Evaluate meta command. So basically here's where we want to do some argument parsing. And so what we want to support ultimately is something like, dump get name, right? But I also want to be able to say something like load, samples, hello.ms, right? In order to do that, we also have to support things, like quotes, right? Because sometimes you have spaces in there, right? And you want to have them as a single argument. It's a bit like argument parsing for a command line, but not quite as complicated. So we want to just have a very simple version of that. So what I will do is I will just do an extremely simple argument parsing here. So basically we will say var position is 1, right? Because we want to skip the quote, the pound. And then we say while position is less than input.length. And we say if position, let me say something like this, var current is position, no, input position. Look ahead is position input length. In this case, it's this one. Otherwise, it is input position plus 1. And then we can say if C is a quote. Yeah, of course, like this. Then we can say if, we just do double, if you want to have quotes in here, we just have to double them, right? So if this is, that's the typical way you escape quotes. So we can say if look ahead is also a quote, then we just say position plus plus, we just skip this one. Else we say in quotes true. How do we do this? We need to have a var in quotes false. So if we are in quotes, then we say, basically we say if we are not in quotes, then we say in quotes equals true. Else if the look ahead is this, we ignore it. Otherwise, we say in quotes is false, right? So in either way, we say position plus plus here, so we always advance. And then we need something like var list. Let's call this args. This is a new list of string. So this is basically the args that we have. So we say basically if we have white space, if char is white space, then we do something like basically saying that if we have an argument currently, so need to have the last argument basically, last arg, let's call this just start. We basically just say commit pending argument, which is a local function that we're going to write. And then we say position equals No, let me say start equals, I guess we do this in commit pending argument. But only when we're not in quotes, right? That's the whole point. And then at the end, we might still have a pending argument, commit pending argument. So what would this function do? Void commit pending argument. It would do something like, so if position, we just say var arc. Actually, no. We don't keep track of that. What we do is we have a string builder. That's what we do, exactly. SB new string builder. And this one will be effectively, of course, I messed up the wrong one, position. And that will basically keep track of the pending argument. So if SB length is larger than, screw it, var arc is SB to string. And trim. If arc, I guess trim is probably not a good idea. So if string is null or white space, arc, if it's not that, then we say arcs add arc, and either way we say SB clear. So now that means we have to just keep track of this one here. So we would say if there is a look ahead, so basically if we have an escaped quote, then we just append this one. If it's none of these ones, we append it. And no matter what it is, we always advance the position. Something like that. We probably want to do this as the first thing, because it seems reasonable to say if we have this, then we just say return. Otherwise, let's call this parse arguments. And here's the part where we have to do some validation, and we can say if arcs length, or count in our case, is not the same as what is this called? Command method. Okay, so we need to get the arguments. Parameters is command method get parameters. Right, and so if we have more, if they have not the same number of arguments as the method parameter has, length, then we say something to the extent of that doesn't work. Error, invalid number of arguments. And then we say usage would be command name, and then let's say command parameter names is parameters select p.name, but let's be nice and say we put them in something that looks like an actual argument, and then we just join the shit out of this, and we just say string.join Jesus Christ. Here we go. And we just say parameter names. All right, otherwise we say parameters to strings. So right now we only support strings, but better than nothing. Not to string, to array. Let's check this really quick. Let's call this test 1. String arg1, string arg2. No. Lots of folks. Yes, why Minsk? Have you considered Minsk? The second condition for that I autocomplete in the middle, apparently, to array. Let's try this one more time. All right, let's see help. That's not good. All right, in line 439. 439. Yeah. It helps to get the arithmetic right. What? Yeah. Apparently there's not enough coffee in this world to make me do these things correctly on the first time. Yeah, this bug is annoying. Infinite number of arguments. Okay, that's curious. Given args count, expected parameters length. Given 1 expected 0. Okay, that's kind of what I thought would happen. So explain to me how I get to 1 argument. Oh, of course. Of course, of course, of course. So the way we parse right now is we also include the first part here, which makes sense. So we first parse all the arguments. And then we will say the command name is args 0. And then we say args remove at 1, right? So if we have 0 arguments here, then if args count is 0, then we will say I guess we can just let's just make this simpler and say command name is first or default, and then we can say if args count larger than 0, remove. Yeah, and then this one will trigger and say invalid command empty, right? So this should work. All right, so CLS, index was out of range. Line 468. 468. Yeah, because remove at 0. Jesus Christ. Mr. Landgraf, have you done a race before? All right, CLS. Yay! Help. Yay! Test 1. Invalid number of arguments. Given 0, expected 1. Hey, so we say test 1, test. Cannot be converted system string. What? I think I probably converted the wrong thing here. Parameters, yeah, that's the wrong one. Args to array. So now hopefully we can do something useful. Test 1, test, yes. Let's test this with, let's actually print back the data. So we say console write line, arg. Arg1, arg2. And now I can say test 1, hello world. Almost. We eat the spaces apparently, which is kind of defeating the point. So we would have to say if not in quotes, commit pending argument, else SB append character. And then we say test 1, hello world. Expected, given 2, expected 1. All right, so now we can say test 2, hello world. Nice. All right, so this is good enough for me for now. Let's remove this one because it's actually just debugging output. The user knows how many arguments they pass because it's clearly visible. Okay, let's remove these commands here. And I just see what my notes say. All right, so this is at the surface of it good enough. Yeah, let's ignore this for now. So here we, let's do this as well. And let's call this update launch script. And then we do this. And then we say make meta commands attribute driven. So one thing I want to do here, because it's easy for us to do, is console out write, what is it, write punctuation, I think, right? Yeah, I think we already had that bug before, right? We have to say Minsk IO. And then we can say write identifier. Edit name. White space. Let's write 3 spaces, and then let's write punctuation. Not because it's punctuation, but because it's de-emphasized. So now when we actually run it, it should be slightly prettier. Yeah, except for the part where we don't write a line. Console out write line. But I like how that looks like. So now if we say help, nice. So now we get some useful output that is also not ugly to look at. And we just call this colorize help. All right, sweet enough. So now let's actually add some more meaningful commands to our REPL. So we didn't just do that to be funny, we also wanted to actually do something useful. Somebody's asking what has just happened, what kind of Git alias was that? I assume you saw me staging some lines. It's called Git iStage. I actually have a video on it on YouTube as well. It's a tool that I wrote. It's a .NET Global tool that you can install. And it basically looks like Git diff, but you can stage individual lines. It's what I do to commit my work. So what do I do here? So in our REPL, no, this one here. So we want to have a command that effectively loads a sample file, right? So let's do that. So let's call this evaluate load. And we say loads a script file. And we say string path. Var. So if not file exists path, then we say console foreground is console color red, console reset color, and then we say console red line error, file does not exist. Let's do the following. Path get full path, because generally speaking we want to do relative paths, but then it helps in the error message when we actually tell them what the effective path was. This way there's not a lot of guesswork. Otherwise you say var text is syntax tree load path, and then we have to do if previous is null, then previous is a new compilation for our, actually that's our syntax tree, right? Syntax tree. Otherwise, we say previous is previous, continue with syntax tree. Or do we? Yeah, we probably have to do this, right? So we would have to say, actually, easygoing, we just say var text is file read all text from path, and then we can just say evaluate submission for text. That's not perfect, but close enough for now. So if I now say load a sample hello.cs ms, it says file does not exist. Okay, that's the good part. The bad part is we continue execution. But now when we actually type a correct file name, samples hello.ms. What? I don't have that file name? No, I'm confused. Oh, because it's hello world. Fine, be like that. Yeah, first let's fix this. Let's actually return. Yeah, it will not work right now because, it will work, but we have to now load the files in the correct order. So if I now say load samples hello world.ms, we will get an error that the function doesn't exist, but we can say get name first, and then we can say hello world. So that's nice. So we let this, we say basically this is good enough for now. I think I want another function where I can list all the symbols that are in scope, which shouldn't be terribly hard. We call this evaluate ls, and we say lists all symbols. And so you would have to say if previous is null, return, otherwise previous. Okay, that's kind of disappointing. We don't expose any symbols yet. So, but it wouldn't be terribly hard because all we have to do now, we can say, what do we have? We have function symbols, right? And that is just global scope. Well, functions. And that would be global scope functions. And we also have variable symbol. Let's call this variables. And now we would be able to say, I guess we can do it even easier. We can say var compilation is previous, while compilation is not null. Compilation is compilation previous. Let's call this submission because it might be easier to reason about it in those terms. And then basically we just walk the list, right? And then we can just say for now console for each var function in submission functions, we would say function console write line. Yeah, how do we do this? Can we do write to? We can. Let's see what this does. So in a perfect world, and right now we just exposed basically what is in each submission. Ideally, we would do something really bit more sophisticated where we would have an API on the compilation that would say something on the lines of like get visible symbols. That does that for us. Yeah, I mean, we can, let's see what this does first. Maybe that's good enough. Have you considered clearing the screen at MSI startup? I think I'd rather fix the bug because it always seems very jarring when these things clear the screen on startup. But yeah, this would probably be a nice thing for now to just do that. So let's do this. So let's have a function add that takes an int y int, returns an int and says return x plus y. Then we say we have a variable x, and then we have an actual variable y, 20, and then we say ls. Yeah, that's unfortunate, but here we go. Okay, that's actually not bad. The only thing we need to do is insert a write line call here. And of course remove this one here because this one doesn't take any arguments. And what would probably be nice if instead of us doing that, we add the actual API I just talked about, compilation, and we have a function here. Something like public enumerable symbol get symbols. Something like that. And then we do something like this here. But instead of doing this, you would say yield return function. Yield return variable. The only thing is we have shadowing going on, right? Where we have to say var scene names is new hash set. Actually, let's not do that now. Let's actually just illustrate my point first because it might be easier to understand this way. So let's just go here and then just say var symbols is, let's call this, yeah, this goes back to what I said earlier. If previous is null, return. Otherwise, symbols is previous get symbols order by s.name. something like this. And then we say for each var symbol and symbols, something like that. Symbol. All right, so now we have this, and now when we can say function add, I think I know what my next command is because I'm kind of sick and tired of typing the same thing over and over again. All right, so now we can say let x equals 100, var y equals 200. What is that blank space there? So first of all, it's kind of odd that this guy does not include the return type here. That might be a bug in the function printer, but I don't know what this guy is coming from. Why is there a blank line? But here's the problem that I wanted to illustrate. So let's say we now define a new variable x, which is an actual variable, right, which we can. And now when we run ls, you will now see there is an x that is a variable and we have an x that is a let, because we now walk the entire chain. What we really want to implement is shadowing. So now if we would do ls now, because we just created a new x, we should not see this x here. And the way we do this is we just go, because our shadowing rules are pretty simple, that's actually not that hard to do. All we have to do here is say var scene symbol names, a new hash set, and then we can say if scene symbol names add function name, right? We only have to check whether the name was seen before. If the answer is yes, then we return it, otherwise we do not. Now let's actually see what the function symbol does on write to. What is that? Symbol printer, I think. Yeah, so this guy has a write line versus variables do not, which is kind of odd. Well, first of all, let's do this. If function, if symbol type is not type symbol void, then we add a punctuation, colon, and then you would do this, right? Type. It seems generally bad to do that. So what happens now when I do this? All right, so now let's see what ends up happening when, okay, so hold on. Before we do anything now, because I'm kind of annoyed by this. So when the REPL terminates, not even when the REPL terminates, I think every time I do an evaluation, I want to store the evaluation so that next time I launch my session, I just get back what I already have. So, and we do this here. We only do it for successful runs. So let's say user profile. That would be environment, get folder path, special folder, yeah, no, environment, special folder. Nested enums are the worst. User profile. No, actually, what is that? Local. Is it local data? Probably. Anything else would be very weird. Okay. Local application data. And then we say local app data. And then we say submissions folder is path.combine local app data Minsk submissions, something like that. Directory create this guy. Current count is file, no, it's directory. Get files in the submission folder. Let me just say length. And then we just say name is something along the lines of submission count padded for 4 zeros, and then we just say var file name is path.combine for submissions folder and name, and then we just say file write all text for file name and for text. Right? So every time we now submit a submission, we save the submission. And because we're nice people and we don't like code like that, we call this save submission. And then maybe we have another one that we call private static void clear submissions. And then maybe we also have one called load submissions. And then maybe, because we're not completely insane, we also add a function to actually retrieve the path, get submissions path. Where we basically do this. Yeah, let's call this directory. Get submissions directory. Directory delete get submissions fine. Well, okay, this is weird. So this should not be static because they need to clearly access state eventually. I guess this guy can be static. Delete get submissions directory and recursive true because we want to delete the whole folder. And then of course we say this is get submissions directory. All right, so now we have them, and then we say for each var file in files, we say var text equals file read all text file, and then we just say evaluate submission for file. Of course, this one is now saving, which is a bad idea. So we need this magic flag initialize, or like let's call this loading submissions. True. Loading submissions false. And then we just say if loading submissions return. This way we don't accidentally do bad stuff. So now we can decide how we want to load the submissions. One option to do it is to say the path is optional, but we don't have support for optional parameters right now. So what I will do instead is I will just say, we do this in startup. Load submissions. And then we just say console out. No, console foreground color is console color gray, and then I guess dark gray. And then we say console reset color, and then we say console right line, and then we say something to the extent of loaded and then I want to print this before, because when we evaluate them, they may also produce output, right? So I guess we should also only do it when we actually have, yes, we probably should do that too. So if submissions directory, so if directory exists, so if the directory does not exist, we just say return. If not files, or if files length 0, return. All right, let's try this one more time. All right, so now if we say, what is it? Let x equals 10. Let y equals 20. Now if I launch again, I get a bunch of errors. Variable C doesn't exist. Unexpected token, colon token. Oh, apparently I write the path. Isn't it fun? Write all text. File name? No, I'm writing the right one. When I'm loading it, I do the wrong thing. Yes, I need to evaluate this. Okay, that makes more sense. Here we go, loaded 2 submissions. And now when we evaluate it, we get x and y back. Sweet. So now if I say function add, we say x, let's say a int, b int, returning int, and we say return a plus b, right? And now if I say ls, okay, there's a space missing. Let's fix that. Symbol printer. That will be here. And we would say, probably here, right space. All right. David Wengler says, I started to write a lecture and parser once, but laziness got the better of me, as with all side projects. Yeah, I mean, it depends on what you define as a lecture and a parser, right? I mean, what we just did here, already I would classify as a lecture, right? The, what is it called? Parse arguments. It's probably in the base, right? Parse. Yeah, this stuff here, this loop here, is basically already a lecture, right? Because basically you just tokenize the input, you handle quotes correctly, and that's all it is, right? So people make parsers this massively complicated thing that most of the time it's not that hard, right? Depending on how hard your language is, you know, it might be as simple as this loop, or it might be something more sophisticated than that. But I don't know, like you should not be afraid of like processing text. I mean, text is one of the most easiest thing to parse. Binary formats are harder than that, but most of the time you get away with something simple. So do it, it's fun. You can do cool things with it. All right, we have 3 submissions now. We have 10 and 20. So one of the things that is a little bit weird is that we still, every time we enter a statement like a variable, when we say let x equals 10, we consider this statement to have a return value, which is kind of odd, so we shouldn't do that. But that's something that we will do in the next episode when we actually lower our global statements into a function. And then these outputs here will disappear because we will generally do the right thing. But now I can hopefully do add 10, 20, and it gives us 30. But that's which is what we would expect. So that's nice. I can also load functions from files. I can say load samples hello, get name ms, and then I can say get name right, which is that, and then I think from there on we can actually do some more cool stuff with the debugging portion of this. The one thing I want to add before I leave is a dump command. So we already have this thing, so I can say show tree. Okay, that's the wrong one. I can say show program. So if we now say something like for 1, 1, 2, 10, print string I, right? You know, it runs the statement, but it also prints the output of that statement, right? So this is the bound tree, and so I want to have a function called dump, where I can say get name and you know, dump get name, and then it should give me the representation of this function. So let's try that. So the way this would work is we just have this, you would call this evaluate dump. Dump shows a bound tree of a given function. Um, symbols of type function symbol where f dot name equals, oh yeah, we need an argument, string function name. And then we just say, yeah, for each of those guys, no, it should be single or default, right? Because otherwise there's a severe bug. All right, symbol. If symbol is null, then we would say error function does not exist. Otherwise, you would say previous emit tree for the symbol, or I guess for the symbol, and console out. Okay, let's go there. So how would that work? Well, we would say bind the program, and then we can say try get value, right, which basically given a function we can get the body out var body. If we don't have one, then something bad happened. Otherwise, you would say, what is that? Writer. No, it would probably be. Oh, I guess I can say body. Write to writer. Yeah, I probably want to do this, right? I probably want to output the symbol as well. I suspect that this now leads a right line, but let's see. All right, CLS, and now we can say dump get name, and here we go. It dumps our function. What's a bit annoying is this one here, which is the line break that I mentioned, but it already works pretty much the way we want. So console write line. No, of course not console. We would say writer write line, and then the same thing would happen here. Writer write line. All right, let's run MSI again and see what ends up happening. Dump add, dump get name, nice. Nice, nice, nice. Okay, I like how this is going. One thing we probably want to do before we close up is reset right now. Resets everything, but then next time we run it, it hasn't reset our submissions. So that's the thing we probably should fix. So we at least have a chance of getting rid of our submissions. Reset, which will be here probably. Where is the reset function? Clear submissions. And so now when we run this, a bunch of stuff is happening. And now we can say reset. And everything's fine again. Sweet. All right, so let's commit this thing in stages. So let's first maybe start with, so actually I probably should have these anyways, but okay, let's first do the submissions thing. So loading submissions, that would be here. Probably need IO for that. Want to clear the submissions. You want to load the submissions. Here are our commands. So now we say we don't want any of those. We want to save the submissions, get submissions, load submissions, clear submissions. Okay, so let's see what ends up happening. So what I just did is I just used a special command in mind where I can just stage everything but the thing, stash everything except for the things I have staged. So this gives me an ability to verify that the thing I want to commit actually builds by itself. And it seems to. Okay, now let me just commit what we have. And we say add a persist submissions between runs. I can push that. And now let me just pop what we have left. So, all right, so okay, so this is basically our so we should probably do this as one commit. And we call this remove make ensure that symbols never end with a line break. And this one would probably be one commit. We would say add missing return type when printing functions or function symbols. Yeah. Could just remove superfluous using. And then let's say, okay, load ls dump. Okay, so let's do this one. Actually, let's do it in the order in which we actually have it written in the file here. So we would say yeah, we probably want at least one blank line. Right, we call this add load command. Okay, so this is ls. Add ls command. And then we have this one here, emit tree, which we need for this guy here. And then we say add dump command. All right, now we have some logical commit. Someone is asking, may I ask how many years you were at Microsoft? I work at Microsoft now for, I want to say, close to 10 years, I think. I think in August it's 10 years. So it has been a while. I feel old. Alrighty, so this is it, I think, for today. So we achieved quite a bit. I'm quite happy with the result. Let's just quickly see what we actually ended up doing. I guess I can just do this, right? Something like that, yeah. Here's what we did today. So we did fix our language version. We renamed the compiler project. We fixed our launch script. We have meta commands now. We colorized the output a little bit more for the help. We have persistence between the runs. And we have some cool meta commands for loading, LSing, and dumping our output. So that's pretty neat. I'm quite happy with the output. Yeah, so this is it for today. I think next week we are going to lower our outputs. So right now when we have scripts, we basically just have them split into, here's a bunch of global statements and here are the functions. And I want to unify them. I want to say if you have global statements, we will effectively make a fake function main where all the global statements are going, or you can just write a global function called main. And if you do both, that would be an error. If you have multiple files, only one file can have global statements, right? Otherwise, you have file ordering issues, which we don't want. And then we can actually treat our interpretive mode or our REPL, if you will, and normal scripts in a uniform way, right? They all make sense together. And then after we did that, I think then it's actually time for us to emit IL. And that's going to be a lot of fun. If you haven't checked it out, Frank Kruger also has a Twitch channel where he's writing a Go compiler. And he already did a bunch of the stuff that I'm about to do. It's pretty neat. You should check it out. And Frank does a great job, in contrast to me, paying attention to the chat. I still need to learn how to do this. I'm so bad at multitasking. I know people are doing this. So yeah, enjoy the rest of the week. And then I hope I can see you next week. Bye-bye.